I gave away your stupid doll collection, Patricia sneered, arms crossed as if daring me to react. They were just gathering dust. The words hit like a slap. My childhood bedroom stood hollow, shelves stripped bare, each empty space a ghost of 20 years of care and dedication. Those dolls weren't just a collection. They were my history, my joy. And now they were gone. They were taking up space, she added with a shrug, her smirk more cutting than any insult. At least now some underprivileged kids will actually play with them. I forced my voice steady. Those weren't toys, Patricia. They were collectibles. Some of them museum grade. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. You're too old for dolls. I did you a favor. A favor, like the time she reorganized my kitchen or landscaped my garden without asking. But this wasn't just meddling. This was theft. Where did you take them? I asked, my grip on control slipping as my hands trembled. That charity shop on Mason Street. Her tone was as casual as if she were discussing the weather. They were thrilled. Thrilled, of course they were. Among those stupid dolls was an original 1968 Wild Lily, insured for $50,000, one of the many treasures she'd discarded. When did you do this? I pulled out my phone, hitting record. This morning. She leaned against the doorframe, inspecting her reflection. Had to make 3 trips in the SUV. Robert thinks it's about time you grew up, by the way. Robert, my husband. Always her ally. But he was out of town. Meaning this time, her actions were hers alone. I took a steadying breath and smiled. Thank you for letting me know where you took them. That'll make it easier. Her smirk faltered. Easier for what? Getting them back and pressing charges for theft. Her laugh was shrill, forced. Don't be ridiculous. They were just sitting here, wasting space in asterisk, my house asterisk. Your house? I turned to face her fully. This is my childhood home, Patricia. The one my parents left to me. You and Robert live here because asterisk I asterisk let you, remember. Her face paled. I continued pulling up photos and documentation on my phone. Every piece was cataloged and insured, including this one. I held up an image of the Wild Lily. It's worth $50,000. Her mouth opened, then shut. That's impossible. I showed her the authentication papers. What's impossible is you thinking this wouldn't have consequences. She stammered, I was just trying to help. No, Patricia, I said quietly, but firmly. You were trying to control me, like always. But this time you went too far. I turned on my heel and walked out, my phone dialing the police. Behind me, Patricia's voice climbed in panic. Wait, I'll fix it. I'll get them back. But I didn't stop. As I sat in my car, calmly giving the dispatcher the details, I felt the weight of years of her manipulation lift. Patricia thought she was teaching me a lesson about growing up. Instead, she was finally learning one about respect. The police arrived within 20 minutes. I stayed in the living room, methodically organizing my documentation while 2 officers interviewed Patricia in the kitchen. Her voice grew increasingly shrill, throwing around phrases like family matter and misunderstanding. Officer Chen, a composed woman about my age, sat across from me, reviewing the insurance records and photographs. This is incredibly thorough, Mrs. Mitchell, she said, impressed. Do you have the security footage? I nodded, pulling it up on my phone. The timestamp clearly showed Patricia making multiple trips to her SUV, hauling boxes of my meticulously packed dolls. She even laughed on the phone during one trip, her smugness on full display. I've contacted the charity shop, I said. They confirmed she brought everything in this morning. Unfortunately, they've already sold a few items. They're checking their sales logs now. A crash from the kitchen interrupted us. Patricia had knocked over a chair, her indignation growing louder. I was helping her, she insisted. They were just gathering dust. This is absurd. Officer Chen raised an eyebrow. Has she done anything like this before? I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop. It's a pattern, I explained, showing her the detailed record. The unauthorized garden renovation, the time she gave away my mother's heirloom china, the endless rearranging of my home without permission. She has no respect for boundaries. Officer Chen murmured her approval of my record keeping. My phone buzzed with a message from Robert. Mom called me crying. What's going on? Why are the police at the house? Before I could reply, Patricia stormed into the living room, her composure unraveling. I just spoke to Robert, she announced triumphantly. He's coming home early to fix this. Mrs. Henderson, Officer Chen said, her tone firm. Please return to Officer Davis. We're not done with your statement. This is ridiculous, Patricia snapped. Emma's just being dramatic. She's always been jealous of my relationship with Robert. Possessive and immature. My jaw tightened. Is that why you gave away my collection? To teach me a lesson? They were turning this place into a museum. Robert agrees with me. You need to grow up and focus on being a proper wife, not playing with toys. The room went silent, her words hanging in the air like a slap. Even Patricia seemed to realize she'd overstepped. Officer Chen stood. Mrs. Henderson, you've admitted to knowingly removing and disposing of Mrs. Mitchell's property without permission and by your own words, with intent to control her behavior. This constitutes theft. Given the value of the items, this is a felony offense. Patricia blanched. A felony? But I'm a grandmother. I volunteer at church. You can't arrest me. We can, and we will. Officer Davis said, stepping in. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back. As Patricia was escorted out, a car screeched into the driveway. Robert hurried up the walkway, his face a mixture of anger and confusion. Emma, what the hell is going on? Why are they arresting Mom? I turned my laptop toward him, displaying the insurance records, photos, and security footage. Your mother stole over $100,000 worth of my collection and gave it away without my consent. Here's the proof. He scrolled through the documentation, his face paling. I didn't know. No, you didn't, I said quietly, because you never asked. You always believed her version of events, never questioning how her actions affected me. You have to drop the charges, he pleaded. She's my mom. And I'm your wife, I replied, but you've never protected me from her. This isn't just about the money, Robert. It's about respect. Something she's never shown me, and you've never demanded. Robert flinched but didn't argue. He watched helplessly as the police car drove away with Patricia inside. I need to go to the station, he said finally. She'll need a lawyer. Yes, I said. A good one. As he left, my phone buzzed. A message from Laura, a fellow collector. Just spotted one of your dolls on Facebook Marketplace. Looks like it was sold this morning. Sending a link now. I allowed myself a small, determined smile. The hunt to recover my collection had begun. Patricia thought she could diminish me, but she was about to learn that some battles are worth fighting, and some stupid dolls are worth far more than she'd ever understand. 3 months after Patricia's arrest, I sat in my newly restored doll room, gently placing the recovered Wild Lily doll into its glass display case. The sunlight streaming through the window caught her vintage dress, making her look as radiant as the day I first acquired her. It had taken weeks of effort, negotiating with buyers, navigating legal channels. But I'd managed to recover most of my collection. The collector who had unknowingly purchased Lily from the charity shop had returned her without hesitation once they heard the full story. Patricia's trial loomed just weeks away. She'd initially pleaded not guilty, spinning her actions as an attempt to help the family, but the evidence told a different story. Her lawyer was now scrambling to secure a plea deal. My attorney was confident. With the records you kept and the value of the missing items, she's looking at probation and restitution, he'd assured me. The judge was particularly impressed with your thorough documentation. Robert had moved out 2 weeks after the incident. He'd left a note, claiming he needed time to figure things out. The irony wasn't lost on me that he needed clarity only after his mother faced consequences, not during the years she bulldozed over boundaries with his silent approval. The doorbell rang, breaking me out of my thoughts. Checking the security camera, I saw Patricia on the porch. Her appearance startled me. Gone was the polished, imperious woman I was used to. Her perfectly styled hair was unkempt, her designer wardrobe replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. For a moment, I debated not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door. Emma, she said quietly, her voice devoid of its usual edge. Can we talk? I led her into the living room, noticing how her gaze flickered toward the doll room, now fully restored. She flinched, her composure faltering as she took in the sight of the carefully arranged displays. I've been in therapy, she began, twisting her hands in her lap. It's part of the pre-trial intervention program. And I owe you an apology. I said nothing, waiting. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I didn't see you. Not really. I saw you as a threat, someone taking Robert away from me. Everything you loved, everything that made you unique, I treated like it didn't matter. I told myself I was helping, but I was just trying to control you. Yes, you were, I said, my voice steady. Tears welled in her eyes. The therapist helped me see why I acted that way, but understanding it doesn't excuse it. I'm so sorry, Emma, for everything. For a long moment, I studied her face. The usual manipulative glint was absent, replaced by something resembling genuine remorse. Thank you for apologizing, I said finally. But an apology doesn't erase what you did. You destroyed something precious to me because you didn't respect me or my boundaries. I know, she whispered. Robert left me too. He said he needs to figure out who he is, away from my influence. Her lips curved into a small, bittersweet smile. I guess I'm learning about consequences the hard way. I stood and walked toward the doll room. Patricia hesitated before following, her steps tentative. Gesturing to the displays, I said, "This collection represents years of my life. Every piece has a story. But you never cared to ask about any of them. You dismissed them because they didn't matter to you." Patricia's tears fell freely now. "I'd like to hear those stories someday, if you're willing to share." "Maybe," I replied, "but first we need to get through the trial. Restitution is just the start. Trust takes time to rebuild." After Patricia left, I returned to the doll room, surrounded by the collection I had fought so hard to reclaim. Each piece wasn't just a reminder of what I loved. It was a symbol of resilience, boundaries, and self-respect. Later that evening, Robert called, asking to meet for coffee. I agreed, not out of hope but out of closure. Whether he'd learned anything about respect and accountability remained to be seen. Either way, I knew who I was now. I knew what I deserved. No one would ever make me feel small again. I reached for Lily, smoothing her tiny vintage dress. "We've both been through a lot," I said softly, smiling at her. "But we're right where we belong." Patricia had tried to teach me a lesson about growing up. Instead, she'd learned one about respect, boundaries, and the true value of the things she dismissed as worthless. And that was worth more than any collectible in my display case.